Joining me now in the studio is Dan Ikenson from the Cato Institute. He directs the Herbert A. Stiefel Center for Trade and Policy Studies. We have talked about this process many times over the last several months. So let's start with today. Talks are ongoing. Is that positive given the latest developments with the tariffs going back and forth?
Oh, absolutely. We need to continue to talk. I think people have talked about the Osaka G20 meeting at the end of June as an opportunity for President Trump and President Xi to get together, but certainly a lot of legwork has to happen before then. So I imagine the talks will continue and that the negotiators on both sides are going to have to find a way to find common ground, because this relationship is simply too important to the global economy, and not to mention just the U.S. and Chinese economy. So we have to resolve this, and it's hard to lay blame for the state of the negotiations, because we don't really have access to what has been discussed and what was included in the negotiations. So we're just going to have to wait and see how this progresses. You know, the stock market's not doing particularly well here, and China as well. So we need to pay heed to the fact that this is the business community, investors reacting, and they need some stability in order to make some decisions. And if they don't know what's going to happen, the markets are likely to continue to tank.
Dan, that being said, are we back to seeing a trade war, or is this really just sort of a bump in the road given the level of discussions and just the magnitude of these trade talks? I mean, is this really about sort of resetting and managing our expectations?
Perhaps it is. I would certainly say we are in a trade war. We were debating this last year, what constitutes a trade war. I think the level of tit for tat and the number of products, we're talking about almost all exports from the United States are subject to tariffs in China, retaliatory tariffs. Right now, about half of imports from China into the United States are subject to these tariffs. President Trump is threatening to hit the remaining nearly $300 billion worth of goods. And that's pretty significant. That is a trade war. The expectations need to be managed in the sense that there are some clear problems. I would say that there are problems that the United States is concerned about and the rest of the world is concerned about in China. But expecting China to be able to snap its fingers and see these all resolved very quickly might be expecting too much. But I do think that if negotiators put things on the table and agree to making certain commitments, that they should keep them. The U.S. and China, even if there is a trade deal that ends the trade war, I think we're going to continue to have, we'll be suspicious of one another. I mean, the United States is the technologically preeminent economy. China wants to be there. It's getting there. And I think that there's going to be jealousies, and we're going to be kneecapping one another to some extent. We want to remain at the technological forward. The Chinese want to get there, and we're going to have to figure out a way to deal with those issues. What we're dealing with here are market access issues, IP issues that really do have discrete solutions that are available. So let's see what we can accomplish.
How soon can the average consumer begin to notice and feel the impact of these tariffs?
Well, prices have already started to go up. Goldman Sachs had released a report today that showed a lot of the products that are subject to tariffs have experienced, close to double-digit increases in prices. A lot of it's being masked in the U.S. because we're at the peak of the business cycle. There's a lot of fiscal stimulus that's juicing up the economy. And so broadly, families aren't really feeling it as profoundly as they could and probably will. Businesses are able to weather it, I think, to some extent. There are certainly concentrated pockets of pain. U.S. manufacturers who rely on imported intermediate goods from China are seeing their costs rise. And when business costs rise, their profits shrink. And when their profits shrink, they can't invest as much and they can't hire as much. And likewise, when there's retaliation against U.S. exporters, revenues go down. That also shrinks profits. So it doesn't take very much to understand the math here, that if we continue to allow these tariffs to plague our relationship, that Americans, Chinese, and people all over the world are going to suffer because of it.
Again, G20, June 20th, coming up in just a few weeks. I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens between this potential face-to-face between President Xi and President Trump.
Yes, fingers crossed for a good outcome.
All right, Dan Ikenson, thank you so much for your time.